To be beautiful, you must be born beautiful. To look beautiful, you have to suffer. So says an old French proverb. Scared to think what women were ready to do for the sake of shaky beauty standards. We will present you top 10 of the deadliest fashion trends of the past that really killed. So, what items of clothing were the fashionistas' craves? Which incredibly popular wardrobe item had been compared to a torture instrument? What was so dangerous about crinolines? And where did the reds come from in their hairstyles? What killed men, and is it true that even a fashionable color was deadly? And finally, what will take the first place of our murderous rating of victims brought to the altar of beauty? The 10th place of our top: houses for rats. Today's hair care has nothing to do with those ones from the past. In past centuries, hair was treated much more harshly. After the fashion revolution under Peter the Great, our ladies didn't look like that anymore, and according to European fashion, started looking like that. It was a wig that became the most fashionable accessory of the century. Under Elizabeth Petrovna, a wig cost as much as 5 rubles, as long as 1 pud of wheat cost only 64 kopecks. They were worn by both women and men. Of course, wearing them was not so convenient, but in the 1730s things got even worse. To achieve a fashionable shade, wigs were thickly sprinkled with powder. In such constructions on the ladies' heads settled not only fleas or moths, but also real rats, attracted by the smell of fat, which held the structure together like glue. Rodents are known to spread many dangerous diseases. Some poor fellows even put cages around their hairstyles at night to keep mice away. So tell me, what could be more disgusting than rodents in your hair? The 9th: gun train, death of a dangerous disease. If someone says that a miniskirt is inconvenient, think about gun train. The train of the coronation gown of Catherine II was carried by 50 page boys, because it was 70 meters long and 7 meters wide. In the 1870s, the train became gigantic. Let's give a word to an eyewitness, Fyodor Dostoevsky. She goes along the boulevard, and a train of 1.5 yards behind her sweeps the dust. How does it feel like to go behind? You have either to run ahead or jump aside, or she will stuff 5 pounds of sand into your nose and mouth. Now let us remember that it was a time of plagues, cholera and typhus, and infected people were walking the streets. All the street dirt gathered under the train, and this peacock's tail became a source of deadly diseases. Fashionistas in such luxury swept the city streets, collecting pathogenic bacteria on the expensive train fabric. Holiday dresses had not been washed for years, so there was a time bomb in the wardrobe. And nobody saw connection between the illness that broke out in the house and the dress that the maid decided to clean. The 8th place takes Fontange. At the end of the 18th century, wigs went out of fashion, and such intricate designs were made of their own hair. Such things were called fontange. A frame of wooden rods, lace, feathers and flowers were inserted into heads of the ladies. Desperate fashionistas built ships and frigates on their heads. Such headdress was worn for many weeks. Walking with it was extremely uncomfortable. Of course, with such a thing on your head, you could sleep only sitting up. By the way, many insects lived in such constructions. It was impossible to get rid of them, neither even to scratch. But this is not the worst thing, because your hair could be caught by trees and you just got stuck. Well, You may ask, how did they wash all this murderous luxury? Such hairstyles were not washed at all. They were wetted with a wet cloth, and maybe it was good. After all, they washed their hair with ammonia water, which simply burned the scalp. This hairstyle was a source of infection and also stank. In order to cover the unpleasant smell, it was coated with melted lamb fat and aromatic pomade. The seventh, corset, a torture instrument and organ killer. The corset was an integral part of women's lives for several centuries. Back in Spain, they tightened the waist to 20 centimeters, and it was called a tool for torture. Over time, corsets were made of whalebone instead of iron. Do you think that in the past, girls used smelling salts so often because of excessive impressionability? No, they just could not breathe, so they kept fainting. Such frames caused fainting and suffocation attacks, deformed the chest and squeezed internal organs, displaced the stomach and caused irreparable harm to health. In Britain, they even made special fainting rooms where corseted ladies could come to their senses at the ball. Since it was considered bad to remove the corset during pregnancy, they caused complications and crippled children. Fashionistas of the late 19th century compared their waists in the corset with necks of their boyfriends. To become slimmer, they even removed a couple of lower ribs, and there was no general anesthesia yet. The sixth, emerald green fabrics, death of poisoning. Another deadly danger of dresses was their color. At the end of the 18th century, Paris green came into fashion. That color became a symbol of wealth and luxury. They got such a noble green shade, mixing copper sulfate solution, potassium, and white arsenic. It caused headaches, poisoning, ulcers, and scars on the skin. In such fashionable dresses, it was dangerous even to sweat. After all, the sweat reabsorbed and poisoned the skin. And they used Paris green everywhere, on accessories and children's toys, to decorate dishes, and the richest people even painted their walls with it, and suffered later. In the middle of the 19th century, coral, magenta, purple, and carmine became fashionable, and they got these high saturated colors thanks to new aniline dyes, also poisonous. Moreover, not only health of social butterflies suffered, but also their appearance. Because of nitrobenzene, the skin got ash-gray shade and the leaves became burgundy. The fifth, pneumonia breakout. At the beginning of the 19th century, a real revolution took place in women's clothing. They loved thinnest muslin dresses that were worn on the naked body and wetted with water, even in winter. Naked dresses caused an increase in pneumonia, which was even called muslin disease. At the age of 24, this young lady on the painting by Vladimir Barvikovsky, Maria Lopukhina, died of muslin disease. There was even a legend: if a young lady looked at this portrait, she would die soon. Although everything was less prosaic, marriageable girls just blindly followed the fashion. The fourth, poisonous flowers. At the beginning of the 19th century, when simplicity came into fashion, deadly fashion seemingly left our beauties in peace. But then, garlands of artificial flowers gained popularity and slowly poisoned the beauties, so that they didn't lose their color and shape. They were soaked in a solution of arsenic or mercury impurities. When a century later, humanity realized the danger of arsenic, the scientists took samples from such tiaras decorated with flowers looking like living ones. They were horrified. 1 gallon contained enough poison to kill 20 people. And the relative of beauties couldn't understand why the girls continued to die in their prime. Not only fashionistas suffered, but also those who was making such beauty. That is how their hands look like. The third, men's top hats. On the third place of the most dangerous fashion items, top hats. If you think that only women had suffered from fashion, then you are mistaken. It was difficult to imagine a man without a top hat. No top hat meant low social status and poverty. But for the manufacturing of top hats, they used mercury. It made felt soft and flexible. As a result, after wearing a top hat for a long time, mercury got into body through the skin and often resulted in death. That is why many men of that time complained about frequent abdominal pain, seizures, sudden fear attacks, and even paralysis. Women also suffered from headdresses. In the second half of the 19th century, such hats with stuffed birds came into fashion. They are creepy themselves. Here is how Nadezhda Taffy described them. At first glance, it looks a hat, but look at it, a whole tragedy. On the band fields, a white or yellow bird is dying, its legs convulsively tucked, its beak helplessly open. In every sense, they killed arsenic, which was used by hatters to mummify birds. And the hat base itself was made of felt, which was soaked in mercury too. So, ladies as well as hatters suffered. The second, skirt that kills. The second place of the most dangerous fashion novelties is occupied by such hoop skirts. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable, dangerous and beloved item of clothing for ladies – crinoline. Designer Vivienne Westwood said that there was nothing sexier in fashion than crinoline. It was great to enter a room and immediately occupy almost 2 meters around you. The crinoline was so wildly popular that they talked about crinoline obsession. Some factories specialized in manufacturing of crinolines, producing up to 3,000 units daily. And now imagine, how could such a beauty enter a vehicle or a doorway? In addition, a strong wind could cause such an indecent embarrassment. But nothing compared to a deadly danger that came from the crinoline. It was difficult to control such hoop skirts, and often they got under the wheels of carriages. But the worst thing was that the ladies accidentally dropped candles on the floor by their crinolines, and dresses caught fire. It was impossible to get out of such a dress quickly. The ladies were burned alive. There was even an expression, crinoline fire. During the decade from 1860 to 1870, about 3,000 women died from such crinoline fires. There was also a case that looks like a horror film. A girl in a hoop skirt came to the printing factory on a tour. Passing by one of the machines, part of her skirt got under the press, and it began to tighten her slowly. And there was nobody nearby who could help poor lady to avoid terrible torment. The first, depolation. And in the first place of our top 10 of the most dangerous fashion novelties of the past is depolation. If you think that depolation is an invention of our century, you are mistaken. But in the past they used breadcrumbs and resin, then quicklime. And at the beginning of the 20th century, they started to do depolation by X-rays. They were advertised as a quick, effective and painless way to remove hair forever. The course lasted for several months, the hair really disappeared, as well as youth and health. Many beauties died by radiation overdoses, and this is still considered one of the most terrible periods in the history of the battle for beauty. Do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story, Oh, and click on the bell so you get notified when the new episode comes out.